He returned from the war, but the war never left him. Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens when a man returns from hell? I'm not talking about Hollywood movies. I'm not talking about heroes who disembark with medals on their chests and a perfect smile. I'm talking about real life, that raw reality that no one shows on screen, but that thousands of American soldiers face every day when they return home. Perhaps you know someone who served. Perhaps you've seen that distant look, that heavy silence that needs no words to convey that something has changed, because the truth is, war transforms a man in ways we can't even imagine. It takes a young man full of dreams, a family man, a devoted son, and returns someone who seems to be in another world. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt that someone close to you returned physically but left a piece of their soul on some distant battlefield? What you're about to discover may surprise you, may move you, and will certainly change the way you see courage and reconstruction. Because today, I'm going to show you the side of war they don't tell you about. It's not about military strategies. It's not about victories or defeats. It's about what happens afterward. It's about men who returned from Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, and had to fight the hardest battle of all, the battle against themselves. Imagine for a second, you're at home, in your bed, but you can't sleep because every noise feels like an explosion. You're with your family, but you can't feel anything, as if a glass wall separates you from everything you love most. You want to go back to being who you were, but that person simply doesn't exist anymore. Stay with me until the end, because the stories I'm going to share with you today aren't easy to hear, but they're necessary. They're real, and they carry a transformative power that can touch any of us. In the next few minutes, you will meet men who descended into the deepest abyss a human being can descend into. Veterans who lost everything: family, work, dignity, will to live. Soldiers who returned decorated, but who could no longer look in the mirror. And you know what's most impressive? It's not the fall. It's what comes after it. It's the impossible transformation that happens when a man decides that, even broken into 1,000 pieces, it's still worth trying to get back up. Today you will discover stories that will change your perspective on what it means to be strong, on what it truly means to start over from scratch, on how the deepest pain can transform into the fuel for the most extraordinary rebirth. Because if there's one thing these soldiers teach us, it's that war doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do after it tries to destroy you. So tell me, are you ready to hear these stories? Are you prepared to see the side of war that Hollywood will never show you? Because what comes next is not fiction. He returned from the war, but the war never left him. Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens when a man returns from hell? I'm not talking about Hollywood movies. I'm not talking about heroes who disembark with medals on their chests and a perfect smile. I'm talking about real life, that raw reality that no one shows on screen, but that thousands of American soldiers face every day when they return home. Perhaps you know someone who served. Perhaps you've seen that distant look, that heavy silence that needs no words to convey that something has changed. Because the truth is, war transforms a man in ways we can't even imagine. It takes a young man full of dreams, a family man, a devoted son, and returns someone who seems to be in another world. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever felt that someone close to you returned physically, but left a piece of their soul on some distant battlefield? What you're about to discover may surprise you, may move you, and will certainly change the way you see courage and reconstruction. Because today, I'm going to show you the side of war they don't tell you about. It's not about military strategies. It's not about victories or defeats. It's about what happens afterward. It's about men who returned from Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, and had to fight the hardest battle of all, the battle against themselves. Imagine for a second, you're at home, in your bed, but you can't sleep because every noise feels like an explosion. You're with your family, but you can't feel anything, as if a glass wall separates you from everything you love most. You want to go back to being who you were, but that person simply doesn't exist anymore. Stay with me until the end, because the stories I'm going to share with you today aren't easy to hear, but they're necessary. They're real, and they carry a transformative power that can touch any of us. In the next few minutes, you will meet men who descended into the deepest abyss a human being can descend into. Veterans who lost everything: family, work, dignity, will to live. Soldiers who returned decorated, but who could no longer look in the mirror. And you know what's most impressive? It's not the fall. It's what comes after it. It's the impossible transformation that happens when a man decides that, even broken into 1,000 pieces, it's still worth trying to get back up. Today, you will discover stories that will change your perspective on what it means to be strong, on what it truly means to start over from scratch, on how the deepest pain can transform into the fuel for the most extraordinary rebirth. Because if there's one thing these soldiers teach us, it's that war doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do after it tries to destroy you. So tell me, are you ready to hear these stories? Are you prepared to see the side of war that Hollywood will never show you? Because what comes next is not fiction. And look, before we dive into these real stories, I need to ask you something. If this topic resonates with you, if you know someone who has gone through this, or if you simply believe that stories like these need to be told, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. It can be a word, a memory, a feeling. Because this connection that we create here in the comments is what transforms this channel into more than just videos. It becomes a community of people who care, who understand that there are stories that need to be heard. And if you feel that this content has value, that it's worth continuing to bring these real, profound, and transformative narratives, click that like button. It seems simple, but each like is a signal to YouTube that this type of story deserves to reach more people. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. It's what allows me to continue researching, telling, and honoring these journeys of rebirth. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Because every week I bring you stories that move you, that inspire you, that show the most human and real side of life. Stories of people who fell, but who got back up in ways you can't even imagine, and you won't want to miss any of them. Now let's begin. Let's meet the first soldier on this journey, and I guarantee you, now let's begin. Let's meet the first soldier on this journey, and I guarantee that what you're about to hear won't leave your head anytime soon. You need to understand one thing first. Every year, thousands of American veterans return home. They come back from Iraq, from Afghanistan, some still bearing the scars of Vietnam decades later. And when they set foot on American soil again, their families are there waiting, their friends embrace them, there are celebrations, tears of joy. But you know what nobody tells you? That many of these men and women return transformed in a way that no hug can fix. We're talking about more than 200,000 veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. 200,000, let that sink in for a second. These are people who can no longer properly recognize their own families, people who look at their children and feel like they're seeing strangers, not because they don't love them, but because something inside them has been reconfigured in a brutal, violent, irreversible way. In movies, we see the hero returning from war, stepping off the plane with that firm posture, medal shining on his chest, confident smile. The camera zooms in, epic music plays, and everyone applauds. But that's cinema. That's fantasy. In real life, soldiers return as broken survivors. They return with empty eyes, trembling hands, their minds trapped somewhere between their living room and a minefield 12,000 kilometers away. Try to imagine this with me. You return home after months or years of service. You enter your room, lie down on your bed, that bed you dreamed of returning to so many times. But when you close your eyes, rest doesn't come. Noise comes, explosion, the cry of your comrade who couldn't return. You wake up sweating, your heart racing, and for a second you don't know where you are. You need to touch the walls, look around, remind yourself, I'm home, I'm safe. But are you really? Because the war didn't stay there. It came with you. It lives inside your head now. That's exactly what happened to James Miller from Oklahoma City. Before the war, James was the kind of guy everyone knew in the neighborhood. A skilled mechanic, always with an easy smile. The kind of man who would stop what he was doing to help his neighbor with his car. Father of 2 young children, married to his high school sweetheart. His life was simple, but it was good. It was real. It was his. Then came the call. 3 years in Afghanistan. 3 years that completely transformed who James was. Because there, he saw things that we can't even process. He saw friends die. He saw innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. He made split-second decisions that carry the weight of entire lives. And when all of that accumulates, when you witness the horror day after day, something inside you breaks. It's not weakness. It's too human to bear. When James returned to Oklahoma City, his wife noticed immediately. He wasn't the same man who had left. He couldn't sleep properly. Any loud noise would make him throw himself to the floor, seeking cover. He started drinking. He began to isolate himself. The children tried to play with him, but James couldn't be present. He was there physically, but mentally, he was still in the mountains of Afghanistan. In less than a year, the marriage ended. He lost his job at the garage because he could no longer concentrate. He could no longer trust anyone. He could no longer function as before. And suddenly, James Miller, the beloved neighborhood mechanic, the family man, was sleeping in his own car. Homeless, familyless, aimless. I spoke with him years after that period, and one thing James told me stuck with me forever. I came back alive, but I left my soul there. Let that sink in. A man who survived the war, who returned with his body intact, but who felt that the most important part of him had remained buried somewhere in the Middle East. How do you start over when you no longer recognize yourself? But I need to tell you what happened next, because this story is just beginning, and what comes next will give you chills in a way you never expected. Before that, I need you to understand how low these men sink, because James's story is not unique. It's the story of thousands, and some of them are even darker. Marcus Thompson from Detroit is another example. Marcus returned from the war, and for 6 months, he simply disappeared. Not literally, but emotionally. He locked himself in his mother's basement. 6 months. He didn't go out, didn't talk to anyone, barely ate. His mother would come down every day with food, knock on the door, beg him to open up, to talk, to come back to life. But Marcus couldn't. He had seen too much, he had lost too many friends, and survivor's guilt was eating him alive from the inside. And you know what's even more terrifying? Marcus is no exception. The numbers are brutal, they're painful, and they need to be said because ignoring this reality doesn't make it disappear. Every day, 22 American veterans take their own lives. Every single day. 22 warriors who survived combat zones, who faced unimaginable dangers, who returned home, but who couldn't survive the internal battle. How do you move on when your brothers in arms haven't returned? How do you look at your life and feel gratitude when you know that men and women as brave as you or braver are beneath the earth? That's survivor's guilt. And it's one of the heaviest burdens a human being can bear. The war doesn't end when you go home. That's the stark truth that nobody wants to admit. The war continues inside you. It manifests in nightmares, panic attacks, the inability to feel, joy, the constant sense of danger, the difficulty in trusting, loving, and living. It's an invisible battle, but it's as real as any combat in an open field. And many veterans fight alone because society doesn't want to see it. Because it's easier to think of the soldier as an invincible hero than to face the reality that he also bleeds, also breaks, also needs help. But this is where the story begins to turn. This is where the transformation begins to happen. And I need to show you this because if there's one thing I've learned listening to these stories, it's that human beings have a capacity for rebirth that defies all logic. Then something happens, an encounter, a word, a purpose. Sometimes it's something small, almost insignificant, but it ignites a flame you thought you'd extinguish forever. It's the concept of rebirth through pain. Because when you hit rock bottom, when you literally lose everything, there's only one option left. Either you give up completely or you rebuild from scratch. David Rodriguez from San Antonio experienced exactly that. David returned from Iraq without a scratch on his body, but completely broken inside. He also went through the isolation, the depression, the dark thoughts that haunt so many veterans. But one day, by chance, he entered a room where there was a support group for veterans. He didn't want to be there. He had only gone because a former sergeant of his had practically dragged him there. And you know what happened? For the first time since he returned, David heard other people talking about exactly what he felt. Other men and women who understood the pain, who knew that empty look, who also woke up in the middle of the night thinking they were still fighting. And at that moment, something clicked inside him. He wasn't alone. His pain wasn't unique. And if other people were there fighting, trying to rebuild, maybe he could too. When you've lost everything, there's only one thing left: rebuild from scratch. And that's exactly what David did. He started attending the meetings religiously. He began to open up, to talk about what he had been through, to listen to other people's stories. And slowly, day after day, he began to feel that there was a way back. Not to the man he was before, because that man no longer existed, but to a new version of himself, built upon the scars, upon the pain, upon everything he had gone through. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened to James Miller, that mechanic from Oklahoma City who slept in his car, will show you that even when everything seems lost, even when life has broken you into such small pieces that you think you can't put them back together, it's still possible to create something extraordinary. Remember James, divorced, unemployed, homeless, completely lost. Well, that same man now runs a non-profit organization that has rescued more than 300 lives of homeless veterans. 300 lives. Let that sink in. The man who lost everything became the hope of hundreds. How did this happen? It wasn't overnight. It wasn't magic. It was a decision. A decision James made during one of the darkest moments of his life. He was sleeping in his car on a particularly cold night when he saw another veteran older than him shivering on the sidewalk. And something about that moment touched James. He had an extra blanket in the back seat. He could have ignored it. He could have gone on with his misery. But he didn't. He got out of the car, walked over to the man, and offered him the blanket. The two began to talk. They exchanged war stories, shared their pain, and shared that profound understanding that only those who have been through hell can have. And when James returned to his car that night, something had changed inside him. He realized that helping that man had made him feel alive for the first time in years. It had given him a purpose. From there, James began searching for other veterans on the streets. He started bringing food, blankets, talking, listening, and other veterans began to join him. A network formed, a community of men and women who supported each other, and this network became a formal organization. Today, James's NGO not only offers shelter and food, but also therapy, help finding employment, legal support, everything a veteran needs to rebuild their life. James told me something I'll never forget. The war broke me. But when I put the pieces back together, they rearranged themselves into a better person than I was before. That's impossible transformation. That's rebirth through pain, because the man James became couldn't exist without all the suffering he endured. The pain wasn't in vain. It was the fuel for a transformation that now saves lives every day. And it's not just James. There are real paths, proven methods that are helping veterans rebuild their lives every day. Specialized therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder is evolving. Therapies like EMDR, which work with processing traumatic memories, are showing extraordinary results. Support groups among veterans create safe spaces where they can speak openly without judgment, without having to explain what they feel to people who will never fully understand. There are also programs with service animals. Dogs specifically trained to help veterans with PTSD are making immense differences. These dogs detect signs of anxiety, wake veterans from nightmares, and create a sense of security and companionship that is therapeutic in itself. And there's something about animals, about the pure and unconditional connection they offer, that reaches places words cannot. Believe it or not, extreme sports are also being used as therapy. Surfing, climbing, skydiving. Michael Patterson, an Afghanistan veteran, found his peace in the Colorado mountains. He started climbing and said something beautiful. "When I'm up there, focused on every movement, every breath, I can finally let go of the weight down below." The controlled adrenaline, the absolute focus required by these sports, creates a mental state that many veterans describe as liberating. It's as if, for a few hours, they can just be themselves again, without the weight of the past. Science is discovering new paths every day. Research with assisted psychedelics, such as psilocybin and MDMA, in controlled therapeutic environments, is showing promising results in the treatment of PTSD. Virtual reality technologies are being used to help veterans reprocess trauma in safe environments. Hope is not just a pretty word. It's tangible, it's real, it's growing. But beyond the methods, beyond the therapies, there's a deeper lesson these veterans are teaching us. A lesson about what it truly means to be strong, because we grow up hearing that courage is not being afraid, that strength is being unwavering. But that's a lie. Courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is waking up every day after hell and choosing to live. Courage is asking for help when you need it. Courage is admitting you're not okay. Courage is trying again and again and again, even when everything inside you is screaming to give up. Thomas Walker from Boston embodies this. Thomas lost both legs in an explosion in Iraq. He returned home in a wheelchair, and the first few months were devastating. He wondered how he would live like that, how he would have a meaningful life. But Thomas discovered Paralympic athletics. Today, he's not just an athlete, he's a coach. He works with other amputee veterans, helping them discover that life isn't over, that they can still do incredible things, that physical limitations don't define the size of their spirit. Thomas has a phrase he repeats to his athletes: "I lost my legs, but I found my mission." And that phrase sums it all up. Because transformation doesn't happen despite the pain. It happens through the pain. It's the pain that breaks you, but it's also what gives you the opportunity to rebuild yourself into something greater. And look, this isn't just about war veterans. Each of us carries some kind of inner war. It could be childhood trauma, a devastating loss, an illness, a failure that destroyed you. Each of us has faced or will face moments where life brings us to our knees. And what veterans teach us is that it's always possible to be reborn. Not the way you were before, but into something new, something forged in pain, something more resilient, more compassionate, more human. Because if a man sleeping in a car can create an organization that saves hundreds of lives, if a man without legs can train athletes and inspire thousands, if men and women who have hit rock bottom can climb back up and even reach out to those still down there, then there is no excuse for any of us. There is no situation so dark that it doesn't have a glimmer of light. There is no fall so deep that it doesn't allow for a new beginning. And the veterans who went through this, who lived through this impossible transformation, have messages for us, messages they want the world to hear. If you're at rock bottom, know this: that bottom can be your foundation. Think about it. The worst moment of your life can be the base upon which you build the best version of yourself. Your pain doesn't define you, your choices do. You don't choose what happens to you. You don't choose war, loss, or trauma, but you do choose what you do with it. You choose whether you let it destroy you or use it as fuel to rebuild yourself. But we also need to honor those who didn't make it, the 22 who leave us every day, those who fought with everything they had, but the pain was too great. And to those we lost in this invisible battle, I want to say, you were not weak. You were warriors to the end. You fought a war that no one saw, against an enemy that lived within yourselves. And if you didn't win, it wasn't for lack of courage. It was because the war was too cruel. Now listen to what you just heard. Real stories of men and women who were destroyed by war and rebuilt themselves in ways that seem impossible. If any of these stories touched you, if you felt this resonated with you, comment below. Transformation is possible. That's all. I want to see how many of you truly believe it. Look, if you've made it this far with me, I know you're different. You're not one of those who gives up halfway through, who clicks away, who only seeks empty entertainment. You want content that transforms, that makes you think, that touches you deeply. And that's exactly what I try to bring you here every week. If this video resonated with you, if any of these stories touched you deeply, I want to ask you for 3 very simple things that make all the difference. First, leave a like, because when you like it, you're telling YouTube that this type of content deserves to reach more people. And I truly believe that these stories need to be told, that these veterans deserve to be heard, that this message of rebirth and hope needs to reach those who need to hear it today. Second, scroll down to the comments and write to me. I'm with you until the end. I read all the comments, I interact. I want to know what you thought, what touched you, which story impacted you the most. This exchange down here is what makes this channel more than just videos. It's what makes it a real community. And third, if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because every week I bring you stories like this. Real, profound, transformative stories. Stories of people who fell, who were destroyed, but who found a way to rise again. And you won't want to miss any of them. There's a video over here that complements this topic, showing another angle on these impossible transformations. Click and continue with me there. Let's go on this journey together. And remember, this isn't a movie. It's real life. And in real life, true heroes are those who get up after they fall. Until the next video.